It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett Bain with my co-host Freeman Michaels. I'm here wrestling with my microphone. It has a mind of its own this morning.
He's in a fight with his mic.
Somebody's got a mind this morning. So it's good to see you, Freeman.
Yeah.
Nice. The week flew by, didn't it?
It always does.
That was fast.
Yeah, we're back again.
We are back again.
This is always home. This always feels like home. I always land when I get here.
We come in here. It takes a minute to settle down. Let the
Or
week
not.
fall, or not. Let the week fall away. Say hello to our crack producer, Spence. Nicely done over there, Spence. So, I was thinking as we were driving in from the coffee shop. For those of you who have not tuned in and heard this week after week, we generally meet and have a little coffee or maybe a little lunch. So as we were there, I noticed there was a young woman.
I saw her, yeah.
Did you see her?
Yeah, the lady with the backpack.
A young woman. She had a backpack. She was running away from home.
She might have been. That's not
It
that's
sure
not
looked
inaccurate.
like she was
Yeah.
running. She looked like
No,
she was
that's
running.
interesting.
So you ever run away from home?
I've been running away from home for, 27 years. I don't know. Long time. But yeah, of course. As a kid, you mean? Yeah.
Well, you know what?
definitely.
I like where you're going with it. 27 years you've been running away from home. Say a little more about that.
Oh, just the trying to find my own way. I mean, so much of what we trails behind us are stuff.
Running away from hand-me-down thinking, feeling, being,
Yeah, it's interesting.
expectation, all that unconditional love that you got, huh?
It's
All
interesting, the oxymoron here, because running away from home, it feels like I've been running towards home. I mean, we started this show. I said, this is home for me. This is where I'm the most comfortable. This is home for me. And it's interesting because when I go back to my family of origin, home, which is still the home. It's the home I grew up in. My parents still own it. It's in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
It feels awkward, and I always feel like, what is this place? And on some level, I've always kind of felt like that. I mean, it's I don't know. The wrong people took me home from the hospital. No, I don't know. It's just this sense of this is fine, but this isn't really my home, and I've been trying to create home. Ever since I left home at 18, and even before. I mean, I do remember those stories of running away from home as a little kid. Did you do that as a kid?
I did run away from home.
How old? Do you remember the first time you ran away from home?
Probably 8 or 9 years old. I had a little jam jar filled with water along with my canteen because I knew I was.
Must have been a Boy
running
Scout.
away, and I had to make
Yeah.
sure. I had to make sure that I was not going to dehydrate. So I learned something at home.
Oh my goodness!
And I had my tuna sandwiches with the crusts cut off and in a little brown bag. And I ran away. I ran to a woods behind my house. And there were these enormous pine trees, enormous pine trees. And close to the ground, the boughs came down and they tented this area close to the ground. And I would crawl under there, and there would be this bed of pine needles, dried pine needles, and they were soft. And I would crawl under there with all of my running away supplies, and I spread out my little blanket, and I was encamped in there. I was sure for the rest of my life.
That was a little sanctuary for you.
I was pretty convinced I was going to be raised by wolves out there, and for the rest of my life, this was it. And it was a sanctuary. The funny thing about it is that I experienced a tremendous sense of peace when I would go into that arbor.
Yeah.
Tremendous sense of peace and feeling centered and cared for and just very relaxed. Now, for the last several years, I've made a practice in meditation of going to visit that little guy in that arbor. I have a relationship with him, and my dog, I had a dog for 19 years, as you know, who left me in great after 19 years about a year or two ago. And he now lives with that little boy.
I love
They
that.
live together in that arbor. And I go and I spend time there.
I
and
love that.
I had the thought recently that the peace that that I remember feeling as a child in that arbor is related to the relationship that I now have with him. All of the attention and nurturing, all of the care, all of the love.
That's fantastic.
That he was unable to receive. We together we worked that terrain.
This is interesting. When my children were just born, I was given a piece of wisdom about them crying and allowing them to cry and learning how to self-soothe, and how important it is to know how to self-soothe and not to pick them up all the time, or at least not to pick them up right away. And this is what strikes me when you're talking, is this feels to me kind of like a spiritual self-soothing. I mean, an early age finding your sanctuary. For me, Golden Gate Park was my backyard. I lived a block and a half from Golden Gate Park. My folks still live there. And I would wander in the woods, as it were, not exactly woods, but, you know, pretty much the same, and find my little sanctuaries and build my forts and do all of that. So it seems to me this piece of having a self-soothing practice that involves going to a sanctuary. And I love for you that it includes a younger part of you and includes your dog. I think that's fantastic. I think that's really a beautiful piece.
Well, as you're speaking, it occurs to me that, you know, at a certain immature, unseasoned time of life, I ran from. And I don't think that that's unusual. I think probably people at certain points in their development, they run from.
Sure.
And then comes the point where something flips and you run to. So you talk about coming here, coming to home. You have a sense now of where you're met.
Yeah, and where I belong even.
Where you belong.
Yeah, because I think as a kid, again, you know, even though I love my family and it's all fine, it was something that I knew there was something else for me. You know, I didn't always feel totally at home in my childhood home, but I have many moments, again, in the woods. I feel very at home in nature. And I love the idea of going inward to find your own sort of home, as it were, a sanctuary, the place where you can really be held. And the part of you especially that needs the holding, that younger part of you that pops up sometimes in less than helpful ways.
Held, loved, understood.
Yeah.
Without any demands to conform or perform or to be good, whatever that means. It's a different kind of relationship with self. I understood some time ago when my daughter graduated high school, went off to college, I grieved that I loved being a dad. And I had an insight at one point that everything that I had learned about being a dad, I could now apply to raising myself, to being a dad, to all of those parts of myself that were still arrested in childhood, and that she had trained me. She had trained me to be able to go, for example, and have a relationship in this arbor, a meditative relationship with this part of myself, and father that child. This is probably
I want to talk about I want to talk about our guest today, because I know that part of what our guest has done is he's redefined home for himself, made a courageous decision to live in a particular way, and I'd love to bring him in to talk about this.
Well, why don't we do a little introduction? We have with us in studio Mikki Willis, my friend Mikki. I'm so glad that you're here. Mikki is founder and CEO of Elevate Films. Elevate Films and Elevate Film Festival. It was atop the rubble of 9/11 in 2001 that Mikki received both a wake-up call and a sense of contribution, his purpose, his meaning, his inspiration. And I invite you to share a little bit about that with our folks.
And your home. I love the story of his home.
And his home. So I think that they are connected. There's
I think you're right.
Of creating community and space of community that, well, I'll let you speak to that, but they're clearly connected.
Yeah, absolutely so. And thank you, guys. It's really good to be here with you. My experience in 2001, I was actually in New York City for the making deals for the distribution of my first movie that I directed, and also there for a funeral for one of the actors that was in the film, and visited the World Trade Center as a tourist the day before on 9/10, and then was around the corner when it all went down, literally, and spent 3 days there in the process of search and rescue and body recovery. And it was an awakening, to say the least. It really shook me awake from where I was focused before, which was, very much in the habitual pattern that Hollywood can force us into, which is, making it and in competition with
extrinsic validation.
Right, that's right. And all the things that I thought were important that were proven to us in the matter of seconds as we watched, $100,000+ cars being demolished by earth movers to bring rescue vehicles in. Those types of events were really stood out in my mind.
Priority resets.
That's right. And then really witnessing which was probably the toughest part, witnessing the families that were approaching us with flyers and photos of their loved ones and saying, "I know they're alive. I know they're here. Tell me you've seen him." And the deep part of us knowing that they're probably not going to be found, and they weren't. And those experiences led me to actually drop out of Hollywood for a while. And I took about a year and a half off. Luckily, I had been hired to write a screenplay, and that paid for me to take a year and a half off. I lived in the Napa Valley in a friend's guest house, and really contemplated what I was going to do with my life, because all I had known up until that point was entertainment. I was in a band, I was in a musical group, and then I was an actor, and then I became a director. And so shaken with the thought for the first time in my life that I was actually involved in an industry that I wasn't proud to represent in a complete way, I really didn't know where to put my talents and where to put my passion. And so that led to, finally when I had enough clarity within myself to say, I actually had an epiphany one day while I was on a panel, because the subject of sports had come up, and somehow I went, well, wait a second here, there are different ways to play baseball. There are actually different leagues that are created, the National League, the American League, they're same game but slightly different rules. Who's going to come together and create a new playing field, literally, so that all these artists that I was getting acquainted with that wanted to find a deeper and higher way to express their original passion for even getting into the arts could be completely fulfilled. And so we started Elevate Film Festival in 2005, and that
which was conceived as a environment in which artists could come together, collaborate without any sense of hierarchy, without any sense of having to conform to any outside expectations and demands.
Sounds like a new home. Sounds like you defined a new space where people could feel what Barnett was expressing, a sense of safety, that they're seen, they're heard, that the parts of them are honored. A
There's tuna sandwiches for everyone with no crust.
There you go.
Jelly jars filled with water.
And really to celebrate what's right with the world, because our media so much spotlights humanity at its worst.
Sure.
And it becomes a very hypnotic state that we're in, and we've lost. I mean, just by the sheer fact that we all say, "Well, we're only human," is clear evidence. That popular cliche is clear evidence that we are not absolutely understanding how magnificent the human system is. And so there's a esteem issue when it comes to just being human.
Sure.
And so this was really about, let's spotlight what's right with the world. Let's show the heroes of the world, the good people of the world, the solutions of the world, the technologies that are our future technologies, so we can actually have something to look forward to and have a better model of what it is to be human.
So I love that. But I want to track back a little bit, because the community you've created, quite remarkable.
Thank you.
Again, it's a different kind of home. There's a different model. And I don't want to speak for you, but my sense is, in order to create this outcome, this output, the inner work, the sanctuary, if you will, that allows for a certain level of innovation and creativity and risk and collaboration and cooperation has to be a different paradigm. Is that accurate?
Absolutely accurate.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about that, because I think it's fascinating what you've done.
Well, we've been, 2.5 years ago, we moved to Ojai, California, and there fluctuates between 15 and 20 of us who live and work in community together. So all of our Elevate team, the core team members, decided at one point, it really started with a conversation of, we had offices downtown LA, and we were really starting to feel the impact on our bodies.
Mm.
And I was a champion for downtown for a long time until finally about a year and a half into it, I went, no, I don't feel so good every morning. And I'm recognizing the impact on myself. And so we got together and someone asked a question and said, how much do you pay for your mortgage and how much for your rent and how much do we pay for parking and how much is it? It was like $45,000.
Wow. A month. Whoa.
You know, and the collective expenses of everyone and their individual homes.
Yeah.
And so I just said, where could we live for half of that?
Yeah.
You know, together and consolidate all of our costs and do these things that we keep making media about, but actually live it. Like let's grow our own food.
Wow.
And let's meditate together every morning.
Yeah.
And let's adapt these practices and so we've been in this experiment for 2.5 years, which has been one of the greatest educations in my life. We've certainly learned a lot of what not to do.
Of course. This is, okay, so we have to take a quick break. When we get back, I actually want to talk about the nuances, because as much as the story has kind of a nice connotation, it's in the underlying, some of the shadow play and some of the ways that our stuff comes up.
It is not without challenges.
That's the point.
So we will be back to explore the shadow challenge after a few messages from our helpful sponsors.
Stay with
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain and our guest today, Mikki Willis, who has the amazing Elevate Film Festival, and we are grateful to have you here with us today. Before we left, Barnett, we were talking for break. We were talking a little bit about the complexities. There's an idea, there's a notion that we want something, and then it becomes complex. And you had some thoughts on that.
Well, there's a certain amount of preparation, and I'm not going to be coy about this. I know we're friends, and I know you very well, so I know the degree to which you have prepared yourself, and the community that you're referring to has prepared themselves. Every member has prepared themselves, has done the groundwork, has cleared out of their personal basements sufficient of the old furniture, old baggage, old stuff, all the old boxes and beliefs and stuff, cleared it out, brought it upstairs, looked at what they wanted to keep, looked at what they were ready to let go of, so that they could function harmoniously in a new kind of community. And we'd love you to share a little bit of what that process was like.
Yeah, we call it the inner work, you know, and I would say that it's a process, an ongoing process, as you just said, and I don't know that any one of us are kidding ourselves to think that we've already sorted through the garbage and have cleared it out yet. There have been times in my life when I fooled myself into thinking that I was at that point, and here comes another layer.
Of course.
Every time, just another layer. And it's really about the humbling to understand that that's the ride of life. And there's always more, and there's always something to look at, and there's always a deeper truth to settle into, and we're constantly revealing ourselves, you know, these mysterious little blind spots, you know, of our own behavior and our own nature that still to this day sometimes shock me when I discover a new element of myself.
Well, artists know, as you well know, and your whole community is artful. I know many of the folks up there. Artists know that the work that it takes to be creative, whether it is creating a painting or a poem or a circus or a community, is requires a certain inspiration, a certain willingness. And then after the willingness, after that inspired willingness, then comes the hard work of manifesting it. So you guys put a lot of attention into both being diligent about what you are co-creating together, and you put in, I've seen it firsthand, equally you create community, you celebrate, you honor each other, you hold a space that generates this inspiration. That is the most, one of the more magical things about being around what you do up there. So how intentional is that?
Well, it's very intentional. That is one of the core practices of our entire team, is understanding that there's often a very large gap between what we enjoy in life and what we have to do. And we're really working on how do we bridge these two so that everything that we do is enjoyable. Even, we all wear a lot of hats that are not, I would say, our deepest passion hats. But but we do what we have to do to get the mission moving forward. And how do we, within all of that experience, take care of ourselves, number one, because we did go through a period with our community. And I will say it's different when we say the word community. There's a lot of stigma around.
There's baggage.
There's a lot of baggage just around that word, and understanding that it's not a commune or anything like that. We simply have consolidated on 15, 20 people into 4 homes on 4 acres of land. And we're not interested in detaching from the world. We're interested in staying fully engaged in the real world and fully active in cutting-edge media and all of that. So it's a professional environment at the very same time.
It's mission-driven.
It's totally mission-driven, yeah. And it's really about balance. It's like, how do we incorporate these practices so that we don't forget who and what we are, and the deepest reason why we're here.
It's a live-in studio.
Yeah.
And I love the word experiment, because when you first introduced us to this 2.5-year experiment, I have an acting coach from years ago. I was an actor professionally as well, who used to say, when you're on stage or you're acting, hold in your consciousness that anything can happen.
Yeah.
And it's never what you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right? And that was so much about creating the next moment as a surprise versus by rote. Even a play that I had done, let's say, 40 times, and I'm back on stage again to do it again. Yeah. There had to be that element of the next moment, it could be different.
Yeah.
And that excitement about that, because that's the kind of mystery I heard you sort of speaking to, that there's these things reveal themselves to us in real time. And we go, whoa, who knew that was coming?
That's right.
But there's an embracing of it. Go on, I don't want to cut you off.
I didn't know that it was an experiment when we moved in. I thought that we were just moving in to, consolidate our bills and that I had a pretty good idea of what the outcome would be. I really had no idea.
That's fantastic.
And
so what's very interesting about the community is that whenever I'm up there, what strikes me is that there is no individual loss of any sense of anybody's personal identity.
Yeah.
Nobody becomes less of what they are.
Yeah.
And the paradox is that together you create something that is greater than the sum of the parts at the same time.
Yeah.
It's incredibly magical.
Can I direct back to the seriously, I don't know, and who knew this was going to play out? Because you had me there. I mean, it's great what Barnett said, but I'm just saying this. Yeah. I did no idea. I want to go right back there.
Well,
because that's exciting to me. Because I love it. I love the idea that I had no idea. Well, what did you learn? What's the big piece for today? I mean, it could be something else tomorrow.
Yeah, for me as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, the interpersonal dynamics of the barriers that keep humans from getting along. We all have families, and we understand that it's difficult for us to get along. Ironically, I found myself, I was standing behind Rodney King when he said to the world, can't we all just get along? Like I was standing, if you look at the old news footage, you'll see me standing behind him.
Like Zelig.
Yeah, like Forrest Gump in the scene where he's looking up around. And that phrase always stuck with me, because what is that? We love each other so much, and family, and we want to be together, and at the very core of who we are, we want to be connected, but there's this thing that creates this constant friction, and friendships go away so fast if someone doesn't agree with our point of view. So what I've learned, to answer your question, really is a real study of archetypes, like the different archetypes that people bring, and I've learned how to begin to learn how to identify those archetypes and start to understand what kind of energies bring what to the entire game, and to the entire experience. And what we've learned together really is really the lesson of not taking things personally, because we realize that when someone is coming into our field or into our experience that's bringing some force of irritation, instead of creating any kind of judgment, we look deeper, we explore what's really going on, what is that bringing up for us, what's really going on for them, what can we learn that will actually become helpful in the media that we're creating through this person who's come into this flowing experience and has just created a lot of turmoil and chaos. One person can do that in what I call a living organism of people. And you start to understand that it's the same way that works on the macro, all the way down to the cellular micro level, is the way this entire living system is working. And so I've found it to be this almost like a microscope into the cellular way that we function together, and it's really helped me as a filmmaker to. I notice the things that I'm writing now are written from quite a different point that spends less time focused on how to put Band-Aids on symptoms, but how to get really down to what's really going on.
I love that.
And I think a lot of relationships spend a lot of time in asking the other one to, stop being who you're being and be more of who I want you to be. And until we get to a point of going, well, I can't do that anymore. And
so you're not retraining dance steps. You are architecting an entirely new dance floor.
Well, we're not asking each other to change from the outside. It's really about what's going on the inside that prevents you from collaborating or being creative with other people, or what's your personal stops.
All right, so
blocks.
now I want to try to tie this together a little bit. In terms of this deep, deep exploration that you didn't know you signed up for, and now you're in the middle of it going, whoa, who knew? Can you connect the dots? I mean, I'm just guessing a little bit. You're a filmmaker. You're an artist. You got into this whole mess with a sense that you wanted to show or teach or tell the story of, right? Something profound. Yeah. What's the sort of destiny piece? Like, what's the little thread that said, oh, I could have never told the story, not in the most profound way, unless I had signed up for this course. Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. And I would
the home course.
Yeah.
The home course.
I would
Track back to the
classify
beginning.
it.
Good job.
If I were to write a book on that subject, it'd be called something like "What's Really Going On."
Yeah.
Because I've spent a lot of time in transformational media, as you have too, and there's a level that we get to, and we stop looking at that point. We go, okay, that's the answer. That's what it is. And there are levels below that, and beneath that, and beneath that. And so it's like, what's really going on with our humanity right now? What's really going on with the systems that are collapsing around us? What's really preventing us from finding and activating and implementing and integrating new systems right now? What's going on within our systems? And so for me, that's what it's been like. What's really going on with me, first of all?
Can I give it a subtitle?
Yeah.
How deep are you willing to explore, to examine, and to expose?
That's right.
Yeah, right underneath your title is that subtitle. How deep are you really willing to go? You really want to do this? Yeah. You really want to do this consciousness thing? You really want to go for it? How real are you willing to get?
That's an interesting point, too, because in examining these archetypes, there are some who come in. I've really dropped all of my desire to want to change or fix anyone.
Beautiful.
I've learned to just kind of go, this guy is playing, this woman, whoever it might be, is that they're committed to that level, and that's perfectly fine with them. And then, this person is here to go as far as they can within this human body that they're in.
So that sounds to me like such a beautiful description of developing compassion and an active caring for yourself and for other people for where they're at. Such a hard thing, such an easy thing to understand. Well, it hasn't been easy. It just clicked in for me as I heard you into such with this level of clarity. I guess the moment of it may take a very long time to get to the point when things seem to change in an instant, but that sounds to me like a journey of discovering what it is to accept people for who they are, where they are, compassionately, actively caring for them where they are.
I 100% agree with that. I think true love is accepting someone and others exactly the way that they are. And when I got that for myself, I really had to look at my life and ask myself that question honestly, like, who do I really love? And there were only a handful of people in my life that I didn't have some thought that, well, they're going to be so much better when they get this way, or
the conditionality of it.
Yeah, just however they are. However
okay,
dad
so
is.
now I want to. We got a couple more minutes, so I want to tie one more piece in. Okay. So I know that you had a son.
Have a son,
but he's a couple years old, right? He's 3, maybe.
He is 15 months.
15 months old.
15 months old.
Okay,
you want to show a picture on radio?
Yeah,
I would love to. Yeah.
All right, so we'll get that out as well. But
we'll paint a picture. He is so beautiful.
In this theme of going deeper.
Yeah.
In this theme of exploring, how deep is your love, to quote a cheesy Bee Gees song from the 70s.
Bee Gees were not cheesy.
Not cheesy.
All right, forgive me. The deep, popular tune.
Yes.
Pop tune. What's that exposed to you in this same context?
ask me the question again.
Your son, having your son.
So
again, this deep love. So you have this sense of yourself that at some point you came to a moment you said, wow, I really have to explore how deep is my love. I mean, I say I love, and then I've got this recognition that it's pretty conditional.
This is a great question.
Yeah.
Because I've always considered myself to be a lover.
Yeah.
I was raised by a single mother and a gay brother and 2 sisters. So I had a lot of that sensitivity and loving old people and dogs. And I love my wife. We've been together 10 years, never one argument, and it's just an amazing relationship. I'm grateful for her every moment. And then along comes this baby. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what my capacity for love was until I held this child in my arms, and I do every single day. And I have to say, even though I can say I love my wife totally unconditionally, the love with our child, and we both admit it to each other, is something that we never imagined experiencing, and it is truly unconditional. I don't want to miss a moment of his growth, and everything that he does and the expression that he is. He's been my greatest teacher, both of our greatest teacher, really, because he's fully alive and fully expressed. And for me, that's really, it doesn't go deeper than that, really.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's beautiful just to see the layers, because what I'm getting from you, and I don't know you, obviously, Barnett, and you are friends, and I know of you, but the level to which you're willing to up your game, at least to the degree that you set yourself up for it. I mean, I love the setups. I know in my own life, I set up circumstances, unconsciously sometimes, for me to really test myself. Like I say I'm about something, and then my universe, as it were, comes up and says, really, kid? All right, check this out. Yeah. And that seems to be the storyline, at least in my opinion, for you.
Yeah. And really appreciating the journey.
Yeah.
Along the way, appreciating the journey, because there's really no place to get. We've heard that before until that's cliche, but it's really true. There's no there. It's here right now, and it's appreciating every single moment. And that took me a while to actually integrate that into my being. I understood it conceptually, but it took a while to kind of integrate that how true that is.
Still a work in progress.
It is so true.
Yeah.
There's an image that comes up for me when you say that. It reminds me of a pot boiling with a lobster in it, and the water is boiling, and the lobster is going, ooh, this is hot, this is hot, this is hot. And then it starts to get used to the temperature, and then things are fine for a while. And then things happen, and it's almost like the fire gets cranked up a little hotter, and then that lobster starts bobbling around again. And I find there are cadences in the world where, similarly, where I get used to it and I get comfortable and my heart opens and I'm able to accept things and people and myself.
And then somebody turns up the heat.
And there are certain kinds of seasons to everything. It waxes and wanes. In the political season is a really great example when every sort of judgment starts to get really ossified and people start getting very fundamental in their beliefs. And I find my own fundamentalism that I think is, has been below the waterline, that starts to boil and it starts to kind of come up, and I can find myself getting triggered by one point of view or another point of view. And to slow it down and to take a breath and to become larger in it, to be able to get the strong arms of presence around it, and to love it, and to love the part that is reactionary, to develop that compassion. Again, it gets to a place where I start to feel comfortable, and there's another season of relative calm, and then the game gets upped again. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know.
You're living in a community where that happens regularly.
And I am grateful for the very first phrase that I learned in Buddhism many, many years ago, and that is resistance is the cause of all suffering.
Yeah.
And when these changes start to happen, these moments.
Star Wars, resistance is futile.
That's right. But when these moments start to happen, and I start to feel my body go into a state of resistance, which is when the stress comes in and all the other things come in.
Stop breathing, you're rigid.
It's amazing. I have a whole birth story online where we can share about the birth of our story if people are interested in going and digging that up on Facebook. But it was really when that lesson of accepting what is landed for me in our life.
Yeah. Hey, with that...
Before we go, we want to know where folks can tune into that, and where they can learn more about what you're doing, where they can maybe find out for themselves about the birth story online?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Of course, Mikki Willis on Facebook, which is MIKKI and WILLIS. Elevate's website, official website, is elevate.us. Just think elevate us. That is our mission, to elevate us. And before we go, because I know that we're almost out of time, I want to take this opportunity on the air to say thank you to you, my brother, who I love so much, for helping to pave the way. The work that you did before I actually had my awakening to step into this realm of conscious media, you were already bravely doing before few were really even stepping into that path. And so I want to thank you for the path that you've paved that allow Elevate to be Elevate, and for me to be doing what I'm doing and leading such a blessed, wonderful life. I thank you and I love you, my brother.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
With that, we have to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
We're back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett Bain with Freeman Michaels, and that was Mikki Willis before the break. A very lot to chew on from Mikki. There's always a lot to chew on from Mikki, and a lot of food for thought there. As I said, Freeman, I've had the pleasure of being up on that property and experiencing firsthand the relational dynamics, the commitment to excellence and to growth and to community and to vision and to mission and to purpose. And it is very inspiring. It is, there's definitely a book there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know,
I'm sure there's a few films there.
There's a lot there, but it is really a model worthy of some very, very deep examination, because there are many, many lessons.
Well, this is it. This is it. Go on, you're doing it.
It reminds me of long division.
Yeah.
You remember long division?
No,
You'd
totally.
have this number, and 23 into 470, and you'd put 23 into 47 goes once, and you put 23 and carry the 5, carry the 2, and you'd work it all out, and you'd have this whole kind of root thing so that you understand the piece. And then once you got really good at division, you could just do it in your head.
And then there was time for trigonometry. There was always the next layer.
Always the
right?
next layer. So Mikki and the way he does relationship, it reminds me of showing your work so you can become a master of
I
it.
love
and
that.
He
Show your work.
He has a mastery of so many levels of intimacy, but and at the same time at the cutting edge of cutting the sort of the new crop, planting the new crop, planting into his virgin awareness.
Yeah.
There they are showing their long division.
So I heard Mikki talking about this community at the very beginning of it. And it's very interesting to me because, of course, I again, he's a friend of yours. I don't necessarily know Mikki, and so I wanted to research a little. And so I listened to a podcast of him on some show right at the time that they were moving into this place. And it's very interesting because how he said, I thought it was doing one thing, and then I realized it was, far more, we use the word dimensional, right? It has these layers to it. And we even used another expression I think is perfect, dynamic complexity, that it's complex. And it's always changing. And one moment I feel like, oh, that's it. And the next moment it's something else, And
your dynamic complexity, to remind any of our listeners, this is language that we talked about for a long time, quite some time ago. So
yeah,
it's nice
we haven't brought it up in a while, but yeah.
It is the awareness simultaneously that, to go back to Mikki, he's working on his own process.
Right.
He's working on his process with all of the various aspects of himself.
Right.
He referred to the
Archetypes.
relating to the archetypes. So there are all of those pieces, all of which he's working with individually and collectively. So you got one plate spinning, then you got another plate spinning, then you got one pin juggling, then you got another pin juggling, and this is all happening at the same time. Then you're doing the community, then you're doing the family, then you're doing. So each one is working in this highly dynamic and highly complex simultaneous giving of attention.
And what happens for most of us is we initially we call it the box. People call it the box, whatever. That we crunch everything down to a kind of way that we want to know or hold things. We try to define our lives. We want to hold it in a particular way. Then everything fits or it doesn't fit, and if it doesn't fit, we marginalize it and get it out of there.
And we don't grow.
Yeah.
Unless if you're fitting it all into the box,
exactly.
There's no growth.
But what we're talking about in terms of consciousness, expanding that box where it can hold more and more complexity, where it can hold more and more spinning plates, as you like to say, that this can be true and not true simultaneously. And I love the idea that Mikki's a filmmaker, because storytelling so often is what we call the second story. It's so predictable. It's like, okay, someone has this difficult set of circumstances and they overcome it and everyone wins at the end and you get to celebrate. Versus, I love films that have a slice of life, where there's complexity, where the characters have elements of light and dark and they're not one-dimensional. And I love that for my own life, because what it does is it gives me permission to have the breadth of my own humanity. I don't have to keep crunching it down. Even the word consciousness is a restriction. Like, I don't want to play that game. Like, I don't even know what this is we do. I like Burnett. We have a great time. We go talk about stuff that's interesting to us. Call it whatever you want. I mean, there's days I feel like that. But we'll call it consciousness. That's fine. This idea of expanding to where we can handle more and more complexity. And what's true in one moment might not be true in the next moment. And we can hold it. We have an awareness, a sense of ourselves, and we'll call it consciousness, expanded enough consciousness to go, okay, I can handle that. That's exciting to me.
That's great.
So I love that in films.
The filmmaker piece.
Yeah, please.
I relate to it, obviously very personally. I relate to it.
You ought
but
to.
I see reflected in how he functions with the filmmaker piece some truths that apply to me as well. The filmmaker piece, this is the artist piece. It's still very important because it's fun.
Right.
Once upon a time, there were other agendas attached to it. At this point, it's fun. And it helps expose the long division. But the deeper cut of it, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I know he'll be listening to this show, and if I am left or right or off course, he'll come back to me and we'll have a conversation about it. He can give me a little course correction. But my sense of it is that the artist, at one point, that was the experience of being the artist at the level of making the film. At this point, what transcends and includes that, the artfulness has to do with an approach and a sensibility about life. It is not simply a pursuit that happens inside of life. There is an artfulness about the way he conducts life.
I love it. And he said that in so many words. He said, I'm not trying to fix anybody at this point. I love that. And I love a film that isn't preachy, that isn't trying to... there was a point, we were both artists as well, where I thought my art was going to solve the world's problems, and that I was this great American movie or novel or whatever. And at this point, I create art because I'm compelled to do it, and I'm not trying to tell anybody if it's good or bad. I mean, I'm just...
Well, you're creating... we're creating a show. He's creating art in any number of places, including not recreating, innovating, including his sense of what home is.
Right.
It is totally off trail.
Right.
It is really generating a unique expression of his own artfulness, up to and including his sense of family and home.
I love it. I love it.
With that, I think we are out of time.
No, we got time.
Oh, fantastic.
No, he was just, I got it. You don't have to worry about that.
I thought I saw Spence waving a clock.
He was. It was way early. Hey, so let's track back to this, because I have more to say about this piece in particular. That the setups, I mentioned this at the end with him, that there are these setups where I think I'm doing one thing, but my sort of destiny, as it were, seemed to allow me to evolve a part of myself, unbeknownst to me, by stepping in thinking I have this one nailed. I know what I'm doing here. Next thing you know, I go, wow, that was not what I expected, and it's off to a totally different trail. But when I get a little perspective on it, there's this tremendous gratitude for the opportunity to go down that other trail, which I personally would never have picked from my old consciousness.
some of the more esoteric traditions.
Yes.
There is language for this.
Yeah.
There is a distinction made between fantasy and fantasia.
Yeah.
So fantasy is the assumption, is the excitation, the attention that is paid to a dream that may or may not be realistic, or may or may not be integrated. It may be a cover for an agenda to vindicate, or an ego trip, or it may be any number of things.
Yes, but we think we know what we're doing.
But
in
we
that
have
paradigm.
a sense, I really want to be an artist, but my real agenda, that I may not be aware of, is I want to be validated, I want to be worshipped, I want to be acknowledged, I want to make a ton of money. What would be more, not that anything is necessarily good or bad about any of these things, but they are not aligned with the original intention. If one says, we don't have to.
All of that gets held in a fantasy, is all we're saying.
So the deeper cut of it is what is called the fantasia. What is the light?
That's right.
What is the light in that dream that transcends the form, that is not dependent on the form, but is aligned to the form follows function, that is really an expression of the function. So you were talking earlier about an opportunity that had just come up for you that drew upon many of the skills and talents that you had developed years ago in a former life as a very successful businessman.
Yeah.
And you thought that was behind you.
Totally.
And now many of those skills are being called upon in service of this whole new opportunity. That function is fantasia.
And it's blowing up my fantasy. It is
my
blowing
fantasy
up your fantasy is insufficient for the ride that I'm on, but the fantasia, this piece of where, wow.
That's what's real. That is what is more real.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also what's so exciting is to allow the ride to take us.
The fantasia is what is discovering us, even as we're discovering it. It's our self-chosen destiny.
Yeah.
And then we come upon this trail, and we are exhilarated. We think we're discovering something. There's a part of us that has laid that trail for us. We come into a relationship with ourselves. It threads back to the beginning of the broadcast.
I was about to say this.
Go ahead.
It's home.
Go ahead.
So there's a way in which, again, it's one of those things we would never be able to anticipate. And then when we're there, we're like, oh, yeah, of course, because it feels like home.
Feels like home. It is that little boy in the arbor who feels a sense of peace. And now as an adult man, I understand that it is me who is fostering a relationship consciously with that little boy. Now I understand why he had peace.
Totally.
With that, I think we have come to the end of another broadcast. We thank all of our listeners for being with us. Stay tuned for Coast to Coast coming up next
on KVTN, KKZZ.
And we hope that you will join us again next week.
Thanks for listening.